And a lot of times in email messages, people have a natural tendency to default to their own time zone or to use information that only themselves know about an acronym. And this adds a lot of confusion and wastes everyone's time. In this video, we'll go over how to spell time zones, dates, and acronyms so that you reduce miscommunication and confusion among your team. So the first tip is to get the time zones spelled out. And let me share an example of an email that I sent Susan, asking Susan if we can meet tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. to discuss this. Now the problem with this email is that 9:30 a.m. is ambiguous. I could be referring to my time zone, whereas Susan might infer that this is referring to her time zone. And another point of confusion is tomorrow. If Susan lives in Australia and I live in the US, then tomorrow for me might mean something completely different than tomorrow for her. So that needs to be clarified. So what you should do is mention the exact time zone, day, and date that you're referring to in your email messages. And you can also help your recipient out and include both time zones, yours and theirs, to further reduce miscommunication. And you can use a free website called timeanddate.com that converts those times for you, and it actually factors in daylight savings time in international countries that observe that. And let me show you a quick demo of how timeanddate.com works. Alright, so here I am on www.timeanddate.com, and when you get to the main page, you've got multiple options that you can choose from. The one I like to go to is what's called the International Meeting Planner. And if I click on that, I get a few options here to pick the actual date. Let's say I want to have this out in May 29th, and I can even choose the year that I want it if it's out in the future. And then you can have multiple locations. So if you're scheduling a meeting or you need to find a specific time zone for multiple areas, this is where you kind of add them. Location 1 is Boston, which is the default region that I'm in. Another location, let's say, could be London, where Susan is. And let's say I just pick those two and I hit show timetable. And this cool little table pops up. There's an option here that you can change at the top. I like to do this every half hour instead of hour. And I hit on show. And what this does is it gives me a table with the actual date on the left, and then the two different cities with the different time zones. And to help you out here in terms of how you read this, anything that shows up in yellow is considered non-standard business hours. Anything in red is basically sleeping hours that are normal during that time zone. And then anything in green is standard business hours or general business hours in those time zones as well. And what you want to do is try to look for anything that is green in the left column and green in the right column so that you choose a time that works out for both time zones. So in this case, I'm shooting for Tuesday, May 29th at 9:30 a.m. Boston time, and that translates to Tuesday, 2:30 p.m. London time. And another thing I want to point out is that you see a little bit of asterisks here on some of those times, and the reason why is because if you go down here to the bottom, this means that the place or city is observing daylight saving time at the time shown or the date shown. So as you know, a lot of countries actually observe that, and the cool thing about timeanddate.com is that it does that for you so that you don't have to worry about doing the conversion or doing the research yourself. Alright, so that was an overview of timeanddate.com. Going back to the example about getting the time zones spelled out, where I sent Susan an email asking if we can meet tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. to discuss this. A better way of doing that is to actually send an email such as, Susan, can we meet tomorrow, Tuesday, May 29th, 2018 at 9:30 a.m. US Eastern Time to discuss this. As you can tell, there's a day, there's a date, there's a time, and there is a clear time zone that explains exactly when that is. So tomorrow is no longer ambiguous if Susan or I live in different countries. And an even better way to actually do this is another example where I say, Susan, can we meet tomorrow, Tuesday, May 29, 2018 at 9:30 a.m. US Eastern Time, i.e. 2:30 p.m. in London. So what I did here was I took what I had from timeanddate.com and I converted that on her behalf. And that way, Susan, who lives in London, will know exactly what time we're going to be meeting tomorrow. All right, the second tip is to spell out acronyms. And you should spell out acronyms at least once in your email, especially if you're not 100% sure that everyone copied on the message knows what the acronyms mean. And a best practice is to spell the acronym at least once at the beginning of the message. And let me give you an example of that. So let's say I'm sending Robert an email saying that the PM would be responsible for a task such as this one. Traditionally, PMs were not supposed to update those documents, but there has been a shift in the way we've approached this over the last 2 years. I know this adds more to the load of the team, but they'll have to be doing this going forward per leadership's direction. So in this case, and by the way, this is actually an example of a similar situation that happened a while ago, where I sent a similar note saying the PM would be responsible, and it was very confusing. Because to me, as someone who works in project management, PM refers to project management. However, for Robert, PM actually stood for product management. And this was where it was a little bit confusing, where I was talking about project management and Robert was talking about product, and it created this contentious back and forth discussion that only got clarified in an actual meeting. So a better way to solve this would be to start out with an email saying the project manager, and then as a best practice, add in parentheses, PM would be responsible for a task such as this one. And in that case, Robert would not assume things incorrectly. And then you can also refer back to the acronym anywhere in your email after you pointed out the first time around. All right, with that, a quick summary. So spell out the exact time zone, day, and date that you're referring to in your email messages. And then spell out acronyms at least once as well. That's it. Thanks for watching. And in the next video, we'll talk about how to use if-then statements to improve communication flow with your team.